And here we are back again, once again. Senor Linjoint, we have got quite a lot to cover. So, first off the bat, how are you
Fair
holding up?
bit. Yeah, good mate. Not too bad at all. Tired. Back at work now. What's this work thing? I don't know what work is these days, but yeah, you know.
If you compare the videos from when we first started doing this and you're in your fucking Speedos and a hammock in like
Struggling
Thailand
getting there.
to like, wrapped up this, that and the other in Nottingham. How the
In my woolly-
how the mighty have fallen. How the mighty have fallen indeed. So the card at the weekend, Hermanson
I
Vettori.
know.
A very exciting card in itself. Anything you want to go over first before we go into it?
Yep.
Anything in particular you want to go over?
The biggest thing I want to mention about this fight was Jordan Levitt's slam knockout of Matt Wyman. Have you managed to see this one yet?
No, was that the main? Okay, what happened with this then? I think I have actually. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. You can see his
Wow.
face just
Yeah.
go.
There you go. That's the reaction I was waiting for. It was like literally the biggest slam knockout, I think, in Pride. It was that much of a huge slam knockout. And it's just the way that he actually meant to knock them out. You kind of want to hurt the guy, but you're not expecting to, knock the person out. Like the Rose slam, obviously, she's done it a few times. She didn't mean to knock her out, but it ended up being an amazing slam knockout. Rampage Jackson again, just trying to get out of the triangle more than anything, but then obviously power bombing him and stuff like that. But this one was something you can see it's actually been worked on. It was there to cause the damage that it actually did. And the way it did it as well, Matt Wyman went literally boom, out cold. It was absolutely beautiful. So the way you kind of set it up was obviously they started, back and forth, a few little shots. And it was literally like the first, 20 seconds, I think, of the first round. So back and forth. And then I think Levitt shot him for a takedown. And Wyman it looked like he was a kind of like the pull guard sort of position. Levitt picks him up, sort of double unders, sort of body lock sort of position, picks him up and walks over towards like where his sort of corner is, as you kind of get taught, come over to your own corner. But then as he was walking over, he kind of swapped his hands from the double unders here to one hand sort of bracing sort of like across this sort of angle here.
Oh,
So he had,
okay.
Yeah, he had his right hand on his left collar. I think it was his right hand, or vice versa. But anyway, he had it across, and then the forearm across the chest area here. And then obviously, as he did it, he used that to drive down and actually, force the head into the mat. And it worked. Whatever they did in the gym, whether it was fully intentional, which I think he said it was in the after-fight interview. It worked because it was an absolute savage, power bomb highlight of the card, because that was just absolutely beautiful. I mean, coming from a judo background, something that was meant to do that rather than it being like a, cause damage but not necessarily knock somebody out, to actually, work on something that was meant to knock a guy out from being slammed into the mat.
I mean, that's certainly Nippon, isn't it? I mean, that in itself is a very an interesting way of going about it, because again, with the arm across the forearm, because natural sort of guard slam as such, you get the natural sort of curvature of the spine, you fall in like a breakfall sort of position, but to intentionally go more the sort of top part to really extend the body out. I mean, that's not an accident. But even then, I think also failing the knockout in itself, I think it's very good to sort of come up in that sort of postured position, because the nature of any kind of guard position, the person on the bottom, if they're not going to stand up, they're going to try and keep you close in those sort of gracie, sort of green zones of, all in or all out. I think that frame really gets in quite nice, because then it stops the overwrap, stops the underhook, stops the cuddling, and keeps that frame, keeps out like that distance.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, no one wants a bit of that.
No, really, really good, and it was pretty savage. But in the interview afterwards, Dana White said that Matt Wyman was perfectly fine, just like a normal knockout, as we say. It wasn't anything more severe than normal. So yeah, he'll be back to fight another day. But it was he's definitely on the receiving end of an absolute beautiful slam knockout and probably one of the knockouts of the year for me this year.
I mean, didn't hang around doing it either. I mean, that's kind of what really makes it so sort of significant. And this is the time to really like, make noise about it really. Now, before we go into the rest of the main card, let's go through the prelims. So have you had a chance to catch the prelims?
I've watched bits and bobs of the prelims. I caught the Valente. I watched some of it. I didn't watch all of it because he was starting to slow a little bit and I was kind of getting a little bit bored. I'm a little bit thinking about Valente because I really like him. He's a great character. And I used to really like watching him fight, but he's moved up to heavyweight. And I don't really see why he's moved up except for he likes eating more pies. That's about it. And I really wish he'd go back down to light heavyweight because he was a much better fighter and somebody I wanted to watch at light heavyweight. At heavyweight, I just don't want to watch him.
Now, interesting you say that because Jake Collier as well, prior to fighting Tom Aspinall, again, he sort of made his way up the weight divisions. So I think this is quite a sensible matchup for both of them. And I'll tell you what, Jake Collier, I didn't have I don't know, I wasn't excited to see him fight because after seeing Tom run through him in like a minute, whatever it was, thinking, okay, who is this guy? But seeing this performance, again, the variety, the pace, the sort of mix up the strikes, this was really nice because, again, if you hear heavyweight fight, you think, okay, overhand rights in the first or a 3-round sort of surviving. Whereas he was kept on pushing the pace the whole fight. And again, it may not have been, overly explosive, but for a heavyweight fight, but that sort of standards, that kind of pace, it was not unheard of. Not like, Kane sort of Velasquez kind of like unheard of, but it was a decent side, a variety sort of striking. And again, Valente taking the damage here in the corner, like wheezing this, that, and the other. But interestingly enough, when they exchanged a few groin shots, and with that in itself, the fact being as gassed as they were, they didn't let the other person recover. Because you'd want their own sort of time to sort of recharge. It was interesting seeing them trying, okay, that should be, I'm all right now, I think, but we'll see what we see. But no, Jake Collier impressed me, but I can't help but feel it was from the expectations I had beforehand.
Yeah.
I tell you who really stood out was Ilia Topuria. Oh, I didn't think too bad. He's unreal, man. Absolutely unreal. And I tell you one thing as well, outside of his performance, it's something quite impressive about him is the fact he's learning English for like he did interviews himself without the translators, things like that. He wants to be the package. Because again, if he's like, just some Eastern European savage who no one understands other than their specific fan base, it's kind of, it limits the potential sort of outreach. Whereas that is making that extra sort of steps. But again, the performance, the pace, everything, the striking, the angles.
Yep.
Terrifying. Absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, and the fact that he's meant to be a jiu-jitsu guy. He came into the UFC with this, credentials in the grappling, being a black belt jiu-jitsu guy. And now he's just putting on a performance like he did then with his hands. And his boxing was absolutely crisp. And the fact that he's only 23 years old as well. And he's putting in performances like this. It can only get better.
I mean, that is it as well. And interestingly enough, the fight after that, Louis Smolka and Jose Quinones.
Yep.
Quinones? Oh, close enough.
Did that the one? Yep.
Yeah, I think, is it Paul Felder or was Dom Cruz saying, like, it felt like there was a crowd there because the corners were so loud and the whole sort of atmosphere. I mean, I can't help but feel the lack of a crowd can help you relax a bit more because you must find yourself inspiring when like you've got a competitive round and like people are watching you. You get a bit more, okay.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're not even being noticed as such, I don't know. It's an interesting one. But again, that sort of pressure, that kind of pace. And Louis Smolka, again, the corner advice was interesting. How it was about, okay, I think there's a few different instances where corner advice was really interesting on the prelims. So if we go keep with Louis Smolka for the time being, again, certain combinations, very positive sort of language being used, like you're winning this is yours, this, that, and the other, along with certain combinations, certain this, that, and the others. Like he doesn't want this sort of thing, take him down or whatever. Again, certain things is a very positive tone, not like a drill sergeant, not like, overly soft, but, the right sort of tone. And even the first fight, Jake Collier and Gian Valente, the corner advice there, I think it was for Jake, was like that 6 was there, that 8 was there, whatever their own combinations are. They've got certain things there. They've got these own little cues. They're very much like, okay, this is there, this is there. These are certain habits. Because again, if you go specifics, like it's so hard to really get that across in that instance. It might not come back again. But it's okay. Every time you feint, he does this, that, and the other. It's interesting having that kind of reference point.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, Lewis Smoker looked really good. It looked good, but I felt he looked quite apprehensive still. He couldn't quite, I don't know.
He had a bit of a slow start. Yeah, I saw that. I catched a bit of the Lewis Smoker one, and obviously the finish as well was very good because first round, he was a bit of a slow start and he was getting, pieced up a little bit. The other guy had lots of movement, very sort of TJ Dillashaw-esque sort of movement, jumping around, sort of like switching stances, a bit Dominic Cruz, TJ Dillashaw style thing. And he was catching Lewis Smoker. But Smoker, we know how tough he is. I think I remember hearing them say this is now his second stint in the UFC. I think he'd been in the UFC since he was 22 years old. He dropped out of the UFC, won a few fights on the local, and now he's come back to it. But yeah, good finish in the end. Definitely.
So we talked to the main card. Obviously, we spoke about the big slam KO over Matt Wyman.
Yep. Then we had Roman Dolidis, I think it is, versus John Allen. Not a bad fight. Not a bad fight. I'll get my words out today. John Allen, he came with it, gave it all he could. Good shot standing, good back and forth, but Roman was just that little bit better, a little bit crisper, and a little bit better in the sort of like the grappling areas as well. There was once or twice in the first round, he actually hurt John Allen and dropped him. And I think he probably could have finished the fight in the first round if he'd have stayed on the ground and pound. But he wanted, for some reason, I think he wanted a heel hook. So he actually hurt him, dropped down, and then went for a heel hook. And that gave John Allen enough time to recover in the first round, and then he kind of went back to standing, and they were, sort of like fairly even, but Roman was just edging it, and then he got the decision win after 3 rounds. But good performance, and he's 8-0 now, so moving forward, see him sort of stepping up the ladder a little bit now and see how he gets on. But he is known for his heel hooks, so I think that's kind of why I think he wanted to keep the sort of like the era of the heel hook, sort of like being known for that. Yeah, he wanted to keep the reputation going with the heel hook finish. But yeah, he got a nice decision win, and I think that was his first time going to a decision as well. So it's good 3 rounds in the bag as well. So that was always a good one. Next up, we have Gabriel Benitez versus Justin James. Now, Gabriel Benitez, obviously, I was listening to the commentary as we were going. Hello, mate. Got a little help. Yeah, I've got a little helper with me today on the podcast. So this is Marshall. He's just not getting no attention, so he's just shouting at me in a minute. There you go, he goes again. So I think you'll hear him once or twice now while I'm online. But yeah, so going back to the Gabriel Benitez, they were saying that he's the hardest kicker at AKA. He's a southpaw guy, and he uses that round kick a lot. Doesn't really kick much off his front leg, but that round kick is power. You can just see it. I mean, they're not big guys. Lightweight, I think they were. So they're not big guys, but the power he has is like, he says the AKA coaches say he is the hardest kicker on the pads. And he used it absolutely brilliant. Inside low kicks to the orthodox fighter. And then he was also using it, they mentioned it a couple of times in the commentary, but he was using it to actually hit the back leg, so the rear leg. And what they were saying is, it takes maybe like 4 or 5 big kicks to start. So you wait till you start feeling it on that front leg. And that's because you're used to being kicked. You're used to being kicked in the gym. You're used to being kicked in fights, even though obviously in the gym you are wearing shin guards, but your leg does get conditioned to that. But then obviously, if you're in the orthodox stance and somebody's aiming to kick that rear leg, it's just not used to being kicked. Unless you're used to switching quite a lot and then you kind of conditioning both legs. If you're predominantly orthodox and you don't switch very often, which it didn't look like Justin James did, and Benitez was going to that rear leg, and after a couple of kicks, you could see it was sort of bothering him. But yeah, he landed a few good low kicks, good body kicks, head kicks, and then he actually finished with an absolutely beautiful step-in knee to the body, and he just shut Justin James down just like instantly. So another great finish. It was quite a hard one for Dana White to pick sort of like performance of the nights on this one, because there was 2 or 3 really good knockouts that deserved the 50 grand, and that was definitely one of them. And I think it actually got it. I think the stepping knee took the money for that one. And then co-main event, I actually missed the first round, weirdly, but missed the first round and ended up catching the second round. So I don't know how the fight was going first round wise, but second round wise, it was a good back and forth. OSP, he's a veteran of the game now. He's been in there with the best. John Jones, he's been in there with pretty much everybody at light heavyweight. Even moved up to heavyweight for 1 or 2 fights, and now he's moved back down to light heavyweight, which is definitely the right division for him. And he was doing really well against Hill. Hill's a new guy, up and comer, 6-0 coming into this fight. And OSP was, in the part that I saw in the second round, was using his range really well. And he's one of them fighters that can fight really well from both sides, southpaw and orthodox. And it really helps with the range, because he'll turn southpaw and his opponent will start getting used to the range on southpaw, and then he'll switch orthodox. And that gives him that little couple of inches just to, slide out the way of punches and kicks, but still being able to land his own. So he was doing really well. But, Hill landed, a really good combination that wobbled him quite bad. And OSP, being the veteran he is, he did try and grab hold of him, try and, wrap him up and try and recover a little bit. But Hill was having none of it, pushed him off. And then, just sort of laid into him again with a nice big, 6-8 punch combo. And the referee jumped in while OSP, he was still standing, but you kind of see he was doing the whole sort of reaching forward, trying to grab him, but getting nowhere near him and just taking damage. So Hill stepped in. Good finish. And Hill, again, he was 6-0 coming into it, now 7-0, and taking out somebody like OSP that has been in there with, like we say, with some of the best in the division, and the best, my personal GOAT, John Jones, and did well with John Jones as well in the the title fight that he had. So taking somebody out that was in the top 15 and having such experience like that, I think Hill's definitely one to watch in that light heavyweight division, 7-0. And I look forward to see who he gets next. And I would expect it would be somebody probably around the 10 mark. So maybe we'll have a look at the light division later, but see who main event. So we've had a few twists and turns in this main event coming up. Jack Hermanson, he was supposed to fight Darren Till. Darren Till got injured, and it was Kevin Holland stepped in, and then Kevin Holland, I think it was some sort of COVID situation that stopped him being part of this fight. And then Marvin Vetorri, is that right?
Yeah.
Vetorri. There's no L in it. Vetorri. Marvin Vetorri. There you go. Say with the accent.
Yeah, say properly. That's why the difference.
Vetorri. There you go. Way better. But he stepped in. He stepped in on late notice for this fight, but he actually already had a fight booked. So he was, he'd done a full training camp. I don't think it was a main event, so he was only training for a 3-round fight. And obviously, stepping into a main event, he went up to a 5-round fight. So, the cardio wouldn't have been, as good as he probably wanted it. But that didn't make much of a difference, to be honest. It was a great fight. I don't know if you've caught any of this, any of these highlights or anything. But so first couple of rounds was very even. And Vetorri actually ended up taking Jack down, which was kind of surprising, knowing that Jack's known as being this great ground fighter and a great submission guy. But he did really well on the ground and managed to control him, and Jack didn't really get much of an offense going. So that weighed on him a little bit the first couple of rounds. And then both landing great shots. Vettori's left hand was just absolute spot-on accuracy for this fight as well. And he didn't throw it with any sort of wind up, any sort of loop to it or anything. He was literally just straight from the chin, straight from that pocket, and he was just straight forward every single time, straight down the pipe. I know he's now training, Italian guy, but I know he's now kind of moved over to train with King's MMA. So he's training with some absolute legends over there, Rafael Cordeiro, one of the top striking, if not MMA coaches in the UFC, especially right now at the minute. He's got some great names at the moment. So he's training over there with him. So he's definitely added to his striking, because that left hand was just, it was money for him the whole fight. But Hermanson, holds his own standing as well. We know him as a grappler. And that's where he gets most of his wins from. But he was still there in the striking exchanges, and he was landing some great right hands as well. Sort of a little bit more looping, but still landing right hands straight on the button as well. And it went all the way to decision. Both of them absolutely great performance. It did win performance of the night as well, like fight of the night sort of thing. And you can see why. First couple of rounds, a little bit more grappling, but the last 3 rounds were literally just in a phone booth, swinging lever at each other, rocker sock and robots. It looked like they were doing the old sort of like boxing sort of style, where you both put one foot in a tire and sort of stand there and you can't get away from each other at one point. And they were going at it, and they were landing some great bombs, and both of them have got great chins as well. I think Vetorri actually dropped Jack in the first round, if I remember rightly, with a sharp left hand. But I think it was more of a flash knockdown. I don't think he hurt him that much. And obviously he recovered and went to the full decision. But yeah, great fight to watch. If you haven't seen it yet, I definitely recommend watching this fight. Great 5-rounder and a great performance. And now Marvin Vettori's just took out the number 4 middleweight in the UFC at the minute. And I think he came in ranked maybe like 12 or 13, something like that. So he's going to be in top 5, after this weekend sort of thing. So it's going to be interesting to see where he goes from now. Maybe a fight with Till. Maybe once Till comes back off his injury, maybe that might be because he took Till's place. So maybe them two together might be an interesting fight, and a bit of European clash, Italy versus the UK. So that might be an interesting one. But yeah, he's definitely going to have a big name across from him in the octagon after this fight, definitely.
Now, this is always the risk, because again, Jack Hermanson signed on the dotted line for a fight against Darren Till, main event, big name, this, that, and the other. So now by taking this risk, by taking this different opponent, he's now lost that spot.
Yep.
Now, bittersweet, this is part of the fight game. But again, this is the difference between boxing and MMA, and this is sort of the point. And this is the whole thing about so-and-so wouldn't fight anyone, this, that, and the other, and like how these fights wouldn't happen, these situations wouldn't happen, they wouldn't be as bittersweet as they are. But it'd be interesting to see Vetorri get the recognition, because again, he's not exactly like, some debut guy who's had the Rocky Balboa-esque, lottery draw to get a fight. He's earned his sort of spot, he's earned his stripes. And as much as, Jax was someone who Darren Till was calling out, this, that, and the other, they all should be in that conversation. Yeah. Now, looking forward, what's coming up, we've got a very exciting card ahead. Now, without going to the main card just yet, on the early prelims, we've got Ben Askren's son, good old Chase Hooper. I can't wait to see him in action. I'll see Ben Askren on Twitter. I can't wait.
Oh, mate, the guy's hilarious. So I've seen obviously some of his videos, sort of like literally when he first got into the UFC, and he was sort of hanging around the UFC, sort of like before fights, and he was going up to some of the well-known sort of people, and he was like, "Can I give you a bit of an interview? I'm Ben Askren's son," and stuff like that. And they were just like eating it up, and they're like, "Oh, are you really?" And he's like, "Yeah." Oh, mate, the guy's he's comedy gold, and I hope the sort of bigger he gets, and obviously the more serious, because obviously fighters even at amateur level we take this seriously, but sort of like the more he progresses within the division and the sort of bigger his name kind of gets, I hope he still keeps that sort of like cheeky humor around the events, rather than being too sort of concentrated just on the fight, which obviously he's going to have to be more concentrated on the fight the bigger the fights get for him. But I just hope he sort of kind of keeps the humor as well with it as well, because he's going to be great to watch in the future, like I say. So it's going to be good to see what happens.
I mean, this is kind of it. You should always improve on skill sets, but improving on like your organic kind of natural humor and stuff. Once you sort of lose it, it's quite hard to get it back. Interesting other sort of fights on this. We've got Angela Hill, got Mackenzie Dern, Cub Swanson. Again, we've got some interesting fighters. These are the prelims as well. Now, Mackenzie Dern's fighting Vienna Jandiroba. Now I recognise her. I think she fought fairly recently.
She fought Felice Herring.
Yeah, she did, didn't she?
Absolutely brawled her. She's
Mm.
like really short, really sort of stocky, bulldogish,
Yeah.
without being disrespectful to the woman. But yeah, that's her sort of style. And she kind of, she's kind of went kind of through Felice Helling. And I think that was her UFC debut. I'm not sure. Maybe she had 1 or 2 fights. But yeah, so that's going to be quite interesting. And I'm pretty sure she's a black belt Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So that's going to be an interesting one as well for Mackenzie Dern. But, you know, Mackenzie Dern is, you know, she's absolutely world level when it comes to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And there is levels, even at black belt, there's levels to this shit. So it's going to be an interesting one to see how that one goes. I'm quite looking forward to that fight. It was one that I was going to highlight.
Have you seen the video of Mackenzie Dern as her accent changes? Because again, obviously her family's Brazilian, but she like lives in California, and like she just keeps putting on more of an accent for some reason. I don't know why. It's one of those ones.
Yeah.
But it'd be interesting seeing her in action.
Yeah.
Now, the fight I'm not concerned about. Let's say my focus: Tony Ferguson, Charles Oliveira. We mentioned it last time, and I'll mention it every single time. Stylistically, so fucking exciting. This needs more attention.
Oh, 100%. This is the main event for me. You know, as good as the main event is, and I'm hoping that Figueiredo gets more of a fight this time. I'm in the same expectation as the last fight he had, literally like 2 weeks ago, was it, or something? I'm hoping that I get to see more of him because I think he's an amazing fighter. I think he's got the potential to be, you know, an absolute star, Brazilian star again, champion for the flyweight division. But at the minute, we're not seeing enough of him. You know, he had the quick win in the last fight, and he had the couple of quick wins over Benitez as well. So I'm just not seeing enough of him to really fall in love with him yet. So I'm hoping this fight is the 5-round war that I want to see, that shows all his skill set, and also maybe shows a little, you know, him getting hurt a little bit, maybe, so we can see an actual, you know, him coming back a bit. But for me, you know, as good as that main event is looking, and I hope it's going to be, yeah, the co-main event is the one for me. Tony Ferguson versus Charles Oliveira, mate. I can't wait for this. I wish we could do co-main and main event 5-round fights. That's what I'm wishing for this one.
I mean, because this is the issue. Because again, Figueiredo is a title fight. You can't have a title fight and not be the main event if there's not another title fight replacing that. I mean, it's beyond disrespectful, but again, I wouldn't be against it. I wouldn't be against it. Now, if we keep it local, keep it on British soil, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, this is like my Christmas come again. The trilogy strikes back. I will talk about Cage Warriors all the time. I prefer Cage Warriors to UFC, controversial opinion. But before we do, we'll shout our sponsors. So we'll start with English Hypnotist. So a bit more context on English Hypnotist. So for anyone wanting to get involved and really sort of develop the mental side of things, where they're sort of self-sabotaging, whatever it is in your fighting, competing, anything, business, the way you carry yourself, anything. It's worth a conversation to give you that, I don't know, bit of an introspective sort of way of how you're talking to yourself, how you're dealing with things. Again, it's not necessarily the novelty, you know, this sort of back and forth with the clock and your eyes spin around a circle, you start clucking like a chicken. No, it's a bit more, okay, you're starting to get a deep, not meditative state, but again, you start to analyze certain things, you start to understand things. And it's a really interesting way to invest in yourself. It's definitely worth listening inquiry. So it'll be the English Hypnotist on Instagram, and Rieco Clothing. Again, their range is always expanding, always looking to develop in different areas. And we've got some things in the pipeline to try and get things sorted, try and expand on the range. And of course, good old Chow, the People's IT. So again, he's got quite a few ventures, but the People's IT is his particular one that sponsors the podcast, website development, and all sort of maintenance needs for that. Now, by extension, indirectly not sponsored, but because Chow's in the conversation, go on, Karsten, take us away. The Vegan Pizza Company.
The Vegan Pizza Company. Anybody in the Nottingham area, pop over on Instagram, the Vegan Pizza Company. Check them out. Like I say, they're really. I'm a meat eater. I do eat a lot of vegan food, but I am a meat eater at heart. And you know, the pizzas are absolutely amazing. One of the best vegan pizzas I've ever had. So pop over, give them a shout if you're in the Nottingham area. And Chow, you should be sponsoring me now. You should be sponsoring me. I should be getting free pizzas for this. So every week I'll give you a mention. I'm just that's a little hint to Chow now. I'll tag him in it.
That's not a hint. that's an order, essentially.
That was like when you were a kid and you're like, I really want a bike for Christmas, Mum. That was the
Argos reference 12746.
Yeah, circling it.
Two circles, one handle. That's
the one.
So again, this is where things get interesting. So when it comes to trilogy cards, the nature of the British circuit, everyone uses Cage Warriors as a platform. This is their stepping stone to the UFC. This is their stepping stone to Bellator, to the world stage, opposed to the European stage. Now, interestingly enough, what you've seen from the first trilogy, a lot of those matchups, winners are fighting winners of other fights in the same kind of conversation.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting. This is a huge thing I like about Cage Warriors. Because, for example, jump around fights, but the Paul Hughes Jordan Machenik fight.
Yes.
So right there, you have two hot prospects. One's undefeated, one's got one loss, but again, 6-5 one of her is. So no 6-1, but never mind that. But more in the sense of, okay, those sort of prospects in another organization, they'd get spoon-fed just, cans, and then would just get maybe fight each other further down the line. Like, again, this is the thing, boxing and MMA. But no, these prospects are maybe premature in their career to fight one another, but, you need these sort of proving grounds. And that's where things get interesting. And again, you guys like Jake Hadley and Luke Shanks. Now, if anyone's had the pleasure of following Luke Shanks on Instagram, or Jacob for that fact, they've been going back and forth for like years now. So to see them get stuck in would be an interesting one. Now, we went into this in quite detail last week.
Yes.
Again, there's still sort of things to note. It's the case of a few things to really flag. Last minute stand-ins. People get tested for COVID. These kind of things. Because again, last time we had quite a few of these last minute pullouts. We had Lee Mitchell and Nathan Fletcher's fight get cancelled. We had Matthias Frederick and Jamie Richardson. All these sort of things. People have training for these camps. And all it takes is one person to pop for COVID, PICOs, whatever it is. And then what? So when it comes to these kind of events, what would you... Let's put your organizer hat on.
Okay.
Would you have stand-ins prepped and ready to go? Would you say, okay, sign up at your own risk that your fight might get pulled and that's, tough shit? Where do you sit with that side of things? It's
a tough one because, having stand-ins prepped and ready to go, you've got to give them an incentive to turn up, be on weight, be in fight shape, if they think they're going to fight. But like, going back to the Chandler first time he got into the UFC, he flew all the way over to, Fight Island. He made weight just in case anything happened with the main event, with Khabib and Gaethje. But he got paid for that. Now, UFC have got the funds to be able to do something like that. And he gave a bit of a story to it as well. Oh, we've got Chandler. He's, he's fresh from Bellator. He's the next big thing to come from Bellator to the UFC, a bit like the Eddie Alvarez type thing. He's good enough to fight for the title already. He's the new face. We're going to fly him out. We're going to make him, he's done a fight camp. He's made weight. And so he gives us a bit of a story. And now, obviously, to his next fight, which I'm hoping is going to be Gaethje as well, is somebody that obviously just lost for the title. It gives that little bit of story going, or I would have stepped in for Gaethje and now I'm going to be fighting Gaethje. So it gives it all that sort of thing. But the UFC can afford to do that. They've got the money. They've got they've got Fight Island. They've got the jets to send him out there and everything else. Whereas obviously, as amazing as Cage Warriors is, and I'm a big fan of Cage Warriors, as maybe not as big as fanboy as you, but I'm a big fan. I made technically my pro debut on Cage Warriors all them many moons ago. So I've always been a fan of Cage Warriors and the people, Graham Boylan and Ian Dean in particular. He was there since I first started ever doing MMA or even watching MMA. And I've got a lot of love for that guy. He's an absolute brilliant guy. So, as amazing as they are, they just don't have the funding that the UFC do. So it's an awkward one to sort of go, especially at the pro level. Amateur level is a bit different. You're not getting paid. It's a bit different. We obviously take amateur very, very serious, but again, it's not your it's not your job. You're not getting paid to do it, so it's not you're not making a living out of it. So having people prepped at amateur level is a bit different to having somebody prepped at pro level, because they have to take time out of their own life that they would, pay their bills. And especially at the moment with COVID and not being able to work, if you can work, you need to get the money while you can, especially coming up to Christmas as well. That's another sort of thing to bring into the mix as well, is, people go buy presents, it's just the way it is with Christmas in the world. So, having to take time out of their life to train full time, to then only be a reserve, a backup in case somebody falls out with COVID, it's a big ask to do. So it's a weird situation, and it's a tough one. If I put my hat on and I had the kind of money, I would love to be able to be like, okay, so you're going to get your fight purse, and you might not even fight, but make sure you're there, you train, you make weight, just in case somebody does pull out and you can step in. But to say that to somebody without offering a fight purse, because you can't offer backups fight purses when you don't have the money UFC does, it's a tall ask. So then you've got the other situation is obviously saying, just be aware that you could get to the scales, and then literally within 1 or 2 hours, once the test results sort of come back, you might not have a fight again. Going through that whole fight camp, cutting weight, making weight, and only fighters will understand how hard that is. But doing all of that and then still not turning up for a fight, and then maybe not even getting your purse then. I don't know the situation with Cage Warriors, whether, if it gets pulled like a couple of days before, if it gets pulled on the scales. I don't know what the situation is with the money. It's a hard ask. So I really don't know what I would do. I don't know I don't know if you know any better to how the situation is with Cage Warriors, if you've spoke to a few people.
So the general, not consensus, but what Graham Borden said in the last trilogy, anyone whose fight's been pulled due to COVID, you're getting paid in full. That's awesome. Fine. So not your fault. You showed up. You did what you had to do. You're getting sorted out. Now, regards to replacements, at the time it was tough shit. The Matthias Frederick, Jamie Richardson fight that got pulled, it was offered to Aaron Khalid because obviously he got his finish over McStanton. However, he would have to go up a weight division for that, which in itself would be exciting sort of thing. But he was told that if he accepted it, he'd have to defend it, and he didn't want to stay at middleweight afterwards, which makes sense. Yeah. So there are potentials. Now, my opinion is a way to potentially not manage it as such, but main events, title fights, those are the things that are sort of a bit more stable, a bit more significant. But then in the same breath, there are people in the same card. Like take the Luke Shanks, Jake Hadley fight. Who would be your stand-ins for that? You'd say Sam Creasy. You'd say, again, you say Sam Creasy. You'd say Adam Amasinga. You'd say the people who are already fighting on the card. And 100%. What happens then? Like, Sam gets the call up, and then Adam's like, what the fuck? I've been training for a fight to earn that title shot, and now so-and-so's got it just because, they decided then and there. Like, it's kind of tough shit to an extent. I mean, this is kind of how business goes to an extent. Like, obviously you've got to agree to certain things, but ultimately it's money going in, money going out. And if they've not got ticket sales, make sure how they can sort of cover the sort of.
That's it.
And this is where things get interesting. So now we'll keep things local again. I'm a bit biased. Battle Arena in March, and obviously other local shows. So Battle Arena, this is something I'm fighting on soon. And again, we got guys from Nottingham.
You're fighting on this one?
13th, yeah.
You're fighting this one? Yeah, awesome. I just want to hear more about you fighting on it.
So this will be an interesting one. So obviously, camps, whatever you want to call it. Now, attitude, mindset, this, that, and the other. How serious should you take an amateur fight? I'll go give my little bit, and I want you to sort of caveat and do your version. So, I am not training for this fight. I am training for my pro career. I am training for my pro title fights. I'm training for these things. This fight is a stepping stone, is a milestone. I don't study my opponents at amateur because the leaps and bounds in development, it's worlds between fights, and if they're the same, then that's their problem. That's a bigger alarm bell, I feel. Currently, I'm trying to develop my areas where I'm falling short in the gym, and I'm feeding back with coaches, sparring, this, that, and the other, being put in certain scenarios and trying to learn that way. So entire personal development, not trying to be biased and stuck to a specific style, not trying to be a grappler or a striker or whatever, just trying to develop as a whole. Where do you sit with that in the sense of goal for goal setting, things to aim for, things like that? Preference, where do you sit? That sort of things.
So I don't know. I think my thoughts on this have changed a little bit. I absolutely love what you just said there. So saying that you're not training for this fight, but you're training for a pro career. You're training for future title fights. You're looking, that's what you want to do. I think it comes down to circumstances. So how old are you now, Dan?
25.
25. Okay, so perfect. You've got a long career ahead of you. So again, I think it depends where you are in age, where you are in life, and where you are in that sort of the career you want to do. You know, if you're, as an amateur, if you're your kind of age and younger, or around your age and younger, sort of like, you know, late teens, early 20s, that sort of age, and you think you want to do this properly, you want to go pro, then yeah, you don't need to train for an amateur fight. You're training to get better every single day in every aspect, ready for when you turn pro, and then you're going to hone it a little bit more per fight through your pro career. That's a perfect way of thinking about it. I think that was amazing what you just said. Okay. But if you're a little bit later in life and you're not really looking at a proper career as a professional fighter, getting paid at the pro ranks, but you want to fight, you want to compete, you want to challenge yourself. You've been doing martial arts bits, you've been going to the club, you've been doing classes and stuff like that, but you think, right, I want to take a fight because I want to challenge myself. I want to prove that I can get in the octagon or in the cage, whatever. I don't want to get copywritten by UFC, sorry. But, you know, you want to get in there and prove something to yourself or prove something to, you know, the coaches that you can do it or, you know, that sort of thing. Then maybe I would say you would train for that particular fight rather than the future. So it really depends where you are and what path you're on, depending how you train at the moment. That's the way I'm starting to look at it now. So it just literally depends where you are in life. And again, where you are in career away from fighting. So where your life is. If you're training to be a doctor, you know, that's a pretty solid career. And you don't want to be sort of, you know, maybe you just want to take one or two fights while you're still doing your doctorate and you're at university or something. Just so you want to challenge yourself and show that you can get in there and do it, then train for that particular fight. Because you're not going to be a UFC superstar if your main focus in life is to become a doctor. So it really depends where you are in the journey of life as in age. So it depends on whether you're, you know, you're in your 20s and you want to have a full pro career eventually, or if you're maybe in your 30s and you've found martial arts quite late, but you want to challenge yourself and have maybe one or two amateur fights. So then you train for the fights individual. It depends on where you are career-wise in your path career. If you're training to be a doctor, or if, you know, if being a pro fighter is not for you, but you just want to challenge yourself and have that little experience of, you know, getting in there with, you know, the lights on you and a referee and a proper cornerman and all that sort of stuff. You just want to experience it. So it really depends on where you are. I mean, what you've said for where you are in life and where you are age-wise and career-wise was absolutely perfect. If it's a full pro career you want, then yeah, you don't train for your amateur fights. It's literally, amateur fights are there to show you where you are in your skills and your training. Obviously, you train your fitness to peak, ready for that fight, but you're not actually training skill set wise for them particular fights. You know, you might have an idea of what you want to do in there, again, sort of game planning a little bit, but that's more working on when can you follow game plans ready for your future career more than actual for the amateur career. So what you said was perfect, but again, it depends on where you are in life. For you, that's perfect. For other people, it depends on the circumstances.
Now, again, there's a lot in that. I feel a lot of it's horses for courses. So as much as it's a general looping statement, again, me at 25 saying, do you know what, I'm working full time, but training twice a day most of the time, most days, and this, that, and the other. Taking it seriously, the next step is, you know, progress, fights after fights, and then build up.
Yeah.
It makes more sense to sort of think long term, thinking, okay, I want to learn things high percentage. I don't care if I'm getting wins at Amis. I want to aim for the standard that will see me through to pro career. Whereas again, if it's someone who's a bit more a hobbyist, it's fun, this is their mountain, this is their milestone as such. You know, that's, again, it's very specific to how certain things develop. And this is where it gets interesting in regards to how you plan things, how you prioritize things, and that you have such a solid game plan of this is what I do, this is that and the other. And it comes down to, I think it's Carl Jung concept, or whoever it is, like we are the stories we tell ourselves, and that I am a striker, I can't do this, that and the other. And you find us following these stories and agreeing with these stories. Like, for example, whenever we mention the gi, you always say, oh, if you're standing, because your judo background, you'd be spot on. But you know, get to the ground, it gets too complicated with this, that, and the other. Like, if you told yourself, I'll work it out because I've got X amount of confidence in this, that, and the other, my pro MMA experience. Lo and behold, look at you, you're a fucking gi grappler now. But because you've already set your stall out, that, you know what, I don't like these lapels. They're not my business.
I like that. Yeah, it's a very, very nice, very good way of thinking about it. I like that.
And again, this is something, I think development is where my personal priority has sort of been as such, because I had a conversation with Ashley Williams, I think he's had a couple of MMA fights, but primarily a grappler, and he's done all the EBIs, all the Polarises. Again, he's the king of Welsh grappling. Now, one thing he said, which I thought was so fucking poignant, anyone listening who wants to compete, this is so important. If you feel you're stagnating, listen to this. You don't get the A in school just for showing up. Your attendance and showing up is the minimum you have to do. It's putting the work in as well, because a huge thing when I've been going to the gym like every day, this, that, and the other, thinking, okay, I'm not making progress. I can't see it. And you rely on incremental growth, this, that, and the other, and you think, okay, eventually it's going to come. Well, what are you doing to get the results that you're gutted you haven't got? What work are you putting in? What questions are you asking? Where are these problems? And having these conversations with yourself. Okay, I'll ask your coach, why is this thing not working? What problems are you having? Try something else. And you must have had it before when you were training with people and you spar with people. I'm doing the same combinations. They're doing the same counter, thinking, oh, why do I keep losing that round? It's a fucking mystery, isn't it? Tell me why I did the same thing and get the same result. It's keep happening.
Yeah. No.
What's your sort of advice to people who are in a plateau and sort of stagnating? How would you try and help someone progress in MMA specifically?
I think that's an amazing way of talking about it. You don't get an A just from attending. That was brilliant, because I find myself doing that as well sometimes, where you've kind of like, you know, you're like, oh, I've been to fucking every class this month, and I just, you know, I've not got any fitter, and I've not, you know, learned anything new, but I've been here, you know, 20 times this month, or you know, however many times you've been, or whatever else, and you know, I put the time in, but it's a difference between, like you're saying, putting the time in actually mat time, or actually putting the time in where you're working on something, putting the work in there. So it's work time compared to, I guess, just turning up mat time. So I think that's a great way of thinking about it. It's 100%. It's like, you're only going to progress if you're actually going in there to progress. Just turning up is not progression. So that's a great way of thinking about it. And yeah, for people that have kind of stagnated and sort of like hit that plateau and stuff like that, for me, it was always trying to learn something new, even if it's just a new combination. You know, I've got my boxing to kind of this level, but I kind of feel like like you said, you know, I'm using all my combos, and everybody's kind of clicking onto it all, and you're kind of plateaued a little bit, and I'm not really sort of like getting, you know, landing the shots that I want to land on people and stuff like that. So maybe just go away on your own think of a new combination, or just like work with somebody a little bit different. Just fresh pair of eyes on yourself always helps as well, just to progress yourself that little bit more. So something like that, just working on something different. I'm when it comes to jiu-jitsu, I'm a very sort of like top heavy sort of like, I want to be on top, I want to put the pressure on, very sort of MMA wrestling kind of based jiu-jitsu kind of fighter anyway. So most of my submissions are squeezers, chokes and stuff like that. So guillotines, darce chokes, rear nakeds, arm triangles, very sort of top heavy. I can switch between them very well. But I don't really go for arm locks and arm bars, and it's very, very rare that I touch the legs. So when I get to the sort of, when I finally get my fitness up and I get to kind of like the where I can actually last longer than 2 minutes and not blowing out my arse in a round. Once I kind of
specified in a round.
Once I get to that kind of level and I start to plateau a little bit, then that's where I'm going to start trying to learn new skills, and that will just push you above that little plateau that you're at. And then when you start to plateau at that level, then you add another skill and you just edge yourself up a little bit more, and then you sort of like plateau again. And that's kind of the way I always sort of try to push myself past the plateau, is just by adding little skills. And you don't have to add lots. You don't have to try and learn a whole new sort of like guard in jiu-jitsu. I'm not going to go from being a top heavy guy and then all of a sudden doing spider web fucking Marvel Universe guard, or whatever it is. Whatever the names they come up with. But, I'm not going to try and completely change my game completely, but I'm going to try and add a little bit to my game until I get to that level again where I feel like, oh, well, I've got that in my game now. I know what I'm doing. It's working, but people are kind of clicking onto it. So I've kind of plateaued a little bit again. So I'm going to add a little something into my game. I'm not going to try and completely change my game, but I'm going to keep adding to my game in different areas. That's how I push myself past the plateau.
And I think there's a lot in that that's really important. And something I feel is even, I don't know, titles in themselves are always quite ambiguous and we give them so much weight. Say I'm a black belt or this, that, and the other. I've been training this amount of time. Again, we give ourselves these sort of caveats of stuff. And I've used it myself as well. Say if someone less experienced catches you or something, and you say to yourself, oh, it doesn't matter, I've let him off, I was, taking my foot off the gas. Why'd you do that? They haven't got to fucking murder the beginners, but if someone like catches you, it's not because it doesn't matter because you're better than them. Well, clearly you're not, because they got you. And like you can give all the caveats you like of I'm doing this, that, and they're trying something else. Saying, well, yeah, but they still got you. And it's not being able to accept certain things. And again, I've got the reference point I always use is when I was a 2-stripe white belt, I thought I was a jiu-jitsu guy in MMA. So it's always a bit sort of reminder, okay, you could be as convinced as you like, but from the outside looking in, it's a bit like, okay, maybe just go back to class, do some shrimps, and just sort yourself out a little bit. But yeah, I think this is a very important topic, and anyone who wants to go in more detail about this, going to the topics, fire my way to Fisticuffs_podcast on Instagram. Again, got myself, Dan_, my personal account, Karsten M. Lenjoint on Facebook, and Karsten Lenjoint on Instagram. Thank you for your time, my friend. Anything from you to leave people on? No, just mega excited for this weekend. Thursday, Friday, and then a double bill on Saturday, Cage Warriors and UFC. So I cannot wait. It's a full weekend of MMA action for us this weekend. Absolutely buzzing.